Hey Ramblers, before we kick off today's episode, thank you for even taking the time to listen to the podcast. We appreciate it. If you love the podcast, toss your 2 cents in using the hashtag Let's Ramble and make sure you hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on all the latest content and updates. Visit us at our new website at offsource.tech and make sure to follow us across all social platforms at Assistance HQ. Now let's ramble. And now, a moment from our sponsor.
Like I don't disagree with you in terms of like people having options. The problem is that you use the fact that there's some percentage chance to be able to get out of it as a reasoning to just turn off your empathy and say that like, oh, so because there was some percentage chance, that means everybody needs to take advantage of that some percentage chance, and anyone who doesn't, it's like it's their fault. So like that's the only part of it that I have an issue with.
Well, because like, it's not like I have an issue. It's not like I don't have empathy for them.
But you're not having empathy when you say that it's their fault, because anything that happened in their life like is their fault. Like if their dad died and they failed an exam, that's their fault.
No,
if they were smoking a J and got fired from a job, that's their fault. Like these things that just happen in life, if they get a ticket and can't make their rent and get evicted, and they either have to like pay the ticket and not go to jail or pay their rent and not get evicted. So they pay the ticket, get evicted. Now they have an eviction and they can only live in so many places. Like there are way too many things that can happen to a poor person in their life that like you just cannot say that things are their fault when you don't know. And like because there's too many people, it's illogical to think that it's all of their individual fault and not the fault of like various snares and traps that were intentionally set up to keep people in a cycle of poverty. Like the people who did these things were doing it on purpose to have this exact effect that we are seeing. It makes way more sense to blame them than to blame every single individual person for having made choices that led to their situation.
My empathy comes in trying to get those people out.
Right, but we just like you just have to establish that that's not going to work. You just have to accept that. Like if you accept that, you can still help people and you can still try to help people individually. You just have to accept that your help is not going to be the end all be all that's going to fix it, and that the problem's still going to exist, and that it's not people's fault for not being able to get out of it right away or do something.
No one's talking about right away. Man, listen, it's not about anything being immediate, and it's not about, I will never not blame someone for their thing, for what, and like, people are just mentally weak.
But how is it their fault and not the fault of the people who intentionally set up the economy and the country in the way to get the exact results that we're getting? Like how can it be? Like, do you just not agree that people
because if you understand what is
creators and
to understand
offers,
to understand what's going on and to ignore that as a factor in what people do is not right. Because if you understand and you have the knowledge of what is stacked against you, then why make particular decisions to continue stacking things against you?
Because things are stacked against you to where the decisions that you make. Okay, here's something I also think that maybe like just hasn't been laid out. So like your brain chemistry is literally different when you're in a secure situation versus when you are not in a secure situation. When you are in a situation in which like whether or not you're going to be able to pay the rent every month is stressful and you don't know and you're trying to figure it out and work it out, and you're trying to pay this bill or that bill and you're trying to figure out how to feed everybody, like your brain chemistry is different than when you have all your rent paid and your car known and you have plenty of money and everything. To where like when you are in a situation where you are down the barrel constantly, you are not able psychologically to see further as far ahead, because you don't have like you have too many things in your way right away to be able to long-term plan in the way that somebody who has short-term security can. So it's like the bad decisions that people, and like not even bad, but like the short-sighted decisions that people in poverty make are not a character flaw. It is a situation caused by like what's going on in their life and what they have to focus on. And this has been borne out by data. Like they take like comfortable white people and put them in the same kind of a situation, and they develop the same stress and the same inability to plan in a long-term fashion.
Okay. going back to what I said, people have become mentally weak.
But how
An-
can you just dismiss
our
that out of
ancestors.
hand and then just go back to the exact same thing?
Well, because here's the thing: our ancestors didn't have that kind of the issue
What do you mean they didn't have that issue?
for
How?
because they were not selfish. Do you like without the long sight of understanding that we aren't going to be free now, but it's for my children.
But what were they doing that we aren't doing
Marching,
now?
bro. Here's the thing: they are marching under the pretenses of knowing that they are going
Are
to
you
be.
talking about the civil rights movement?
Yes, I'm
So
talking
you're
about this.
saying,
I'm saying that in the mindset, in order to do a civil rights movement at that time, because doing a civil rights movement today is way easier than doing a civil rights movement in the 1950s and 1960s.
I mean, what do you mean by easier?
What do you mean? What do I mean by easier? It is much like racism was closer to its core. There was like the hiding of racism is almost a privilege, if you will. There was no that our ancestors didn't have that privilege. They were called nigger to the face without the oh, I didn't mean to say it. No, I called you a nigger. You know what? There's nothing you can literally do about it. We will sick these dogs on you. That's different than tear gas. Putting hoses on you. That's different than tear gas. Real bullets instead of rubber bullets. And knowing that going to these going here, not knowing that these people are going, like knowing that these people will sick dogs on you, will put the hoses on you, is completely different than going somewhere and like, okay, they're probably going to do some tear gas, maybe.
Okay, so you're saying it's easier in the sense that the consequences are less severe?
The consequences are less severe, and the actions and the mindsets are completely different. Which is why it's easier for someone, I would say, in this particular day and age. I'm not going to say it's easy to be an activist, but back then it was much harder. The fight was at the beginning. We're fighting a fight that has already been fought. They were fighting a fight, not necessarily a new fight because it's about equality, but it was the start. Like that was a changing point. Like if, for example, if they started to defund the police because of all of this situation is the reason that they defunded the police, not because of Rodney King, not because of all the other people, but because of this particular situation with George Floyd is why they chose to defund the police. So the reason that they had it, much harder back then is because there was no, oh, what are we're trying to do? We're trying to be equal. We are trying to now have like what is blatantly in our face be dismantled while actively facing physical, not just necessarily mental, but real life physical oppression. Yes, there's physical oppression in today. They're doing tear gas, but it's completely like no one's getting dog sick though. No one's getting sprayed down with hoses.
So I guess I'm just, because those people are the people who are alive today's grandparents that are young. So like, if you're talking about people not passing down and not pouring into, like, those would be the people you'd be pointing at. So I'm not sure, like,
yes,
how, like, what were they supposed to pour down and pass into that they didn't?
the mindset, because they don't feel like when your mindset is I'm doing something for my children, that's completely different than the ones that aren't. Because guess what? There were more people that didn't march than did march.
Okay.
So the majority of the people, because we can only talk about so many, the majority of the people didn't march. Why? That mindset has also been passed down.
Well, I mean, that's just the pattern that exists everywhere. Like in every place where people protest, some people do and some people don't. Just varying percentages, because that's just kind of how people are. Some people are the type that'll be out there protesting, and some people just are the type that would never be out there no matter what.
But what are you doing? for that? Why are you not trying to make the world a better place for your child? Because you're in your mind, you're thinking, well, nothing I do is going to work anyway. That's a
Or they're
defeatist
just
mind.
afraid and they don't want to go. I mean, me personally, the reason that I have not like really like done like a lot or really any protests, like number one, the virus, which I think is just a good enough reason. Like I
It's not
have
about the
asthma.
protests. It's what are you doing? Not
No, but
about the.
I'm just saying that like personally also it's like genuinely fear of the police. Like me being as big as I am, like I just feel like being around agitated police officers is just like genuinely dangerous for me.
It is
So
very
like
dangerous. It is
I
extremely
am like
dangerous for you.
afraid, and I was afraid to go, and so I didn't go. Like I think that's completely reasonable. I don't think that's a bad mindset.
It's completely reasonable on why you didn't go, but don't forget that mindset is then passed down to your kids, and it's almost kind of selfish. You didn't put yourself in danger to continue to allow everybody else to be put in danger, which then will allow your kid to have the same fear. So you're going to then pass down that fear to your child, who is now scared about being black in the police. But here's the thing: had we all decided to take the effort needed, enough people, because sometimes it's just a matter of a certain amount of people doing something, where if you believe that your vote counts, your action counts. If
I
you
mean,
believe that your
okay.
singular vote counts, because you did politics, so I'm sure you wanted to be like, the vote counts. Vote for the right people. Your one vote matters. Your one
No,
action.
I don't. I wasn't really one of those that believes individual votes matter, but like in terms of like strategically trying to target where you can win races to get really good people in, that's more so where I was at.
You
Like
said
voting is not really real,
so. You
kind
said
of.
you wanted to win racists.
No, win races. Like where you can like
Okay.
strategically get a really good person in because there's a
Okay.
bunch of people that might vote for you in the area.
Okay. So strategically, and that was your mindset, right? Now, what did you do for that to happen? What now? If that's what you believe, whatever you believe to make a change, people have whatever thoughts they have that they would like to make a change. Yet the actions to make that change don't correlate. So people say they want a change and not necessarily making the actions to make a change. That is then passed down to your child in two ways. One, because guess what? You didn't make the effort to make a change, so now your child has to go through it. Two, that fear of making a change and knowing and feeling like, oh, whatever I do isn't going to do anything. So I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to worry about just focusing on me.
I mean, right, but like if anything, that sounds like the kind of statement that would be said by someone who says that people's situation individually is their fault and not the fault of like the racist system.
Oh my gosh, bro. How?
Because
So
that's completely correlated. Like somebody saying like, "Oh, I'm just gonna worry about me," so like everybody else needs to worry about them, and if they're not able to make it happen, that's their fault.
so that kind of sounds like you as a black person saying, well, I mean, this is how it is. I'm not going to do anything. I don't plan on having kids. It doesn't matter. Whatever happens, happens. I'm not going to risk my life for somebody else.
I mean, I didn't say that.
I mean, but that's what I'm saying is passed down with like the majority. If more people didn't go to marches than did go to marches, that means more people passed down a defeatist mindset than passed down an overcoming mindset.
I mean, I guess I just think that like I don't know, like I just like I'm just like a really really reality based thinker to where like just concepts like mindset like to me that's like witchcraft essentially like it's
Okay,
just
how about how?
completely something that's totally made up and not real at all. Like
Oh my god! You think mindset is witchcraft?
it's like Pokemon, bro.
Bro, that is the bro. How are you going to pull up facts about your brain being chemically different depending on your situation and not being able to talk about mindset being a real thing?
Because like brain chemistry is a real thing versus mindset is not a real thing.
Mindset is, oh my god! You just said mindset's not a real thing.
It's just not really. It's not a real thing in the sense that it makes a tangible change in what's going on around you.
Okay. Donald Trump has a particular perspective. Perspective is mindset.
Donald Trump is the son of a like multi-billionaire who
Listen,
committed tax fraud to give him hundreds of millions of
listen.
dollars funneled into his business to
We're
overcome
not
his
talking about. We're
7
not talking about.
bankruptcies.
We're not talking about that.
But you just
Donald.
brought him up, so I'm just
Okay.
saying that's additional context to where like anything you're going to bring up that's about mindset, it's actually because he inherited $200 million.
I'm not talking anything about what Donald Trump has inherited. Donald Trump has a
But
particular.
his mindset is like did not affect anything. Him inheriting $200 million is what
No,
created anything that he has ever achieved.
So I'm glad you said that. So if his mindset didn't affect anything, why has he been the president that has the weirdest fan base following?
Because white nationalism is really popular in America, but like it's
So his
starting to
mind,
become slightly taboo.
so his mindset, his perspective has done this change, because here's like the mindset of Donald Trump that has caused him to do particular actions and say certain things has then resonated with people that support him and cause them to act and feel and do certain things because they feel like it's okay because their president has this perspective and mindset. So tell me how mindset doesn't physically change anything. And we weren't talking about what money he inherited or anything. We're talking about
People
the mindset.
connected with him as a person. That's like his like. I mean, he does have a sense of charisma, and he said things that people wanted to hear. And when people heard the things that they wanted to hear, they liked it. And when he realized that people like to hear certain things, he kept saying it and
That's
kept building
mindset.
because that's what he does. He's a
That's
show
mindset.
pony.
That's a mindset.
That's not a mindset. He's just a show pony who just like
That's a mind, bro. Your
does what makes
perspective
people
is your
clap.
mind. Perspective is mindset. Put it like that. Whatever your perspective is, that's your mindset. Like if I were to look up the definition of mindset, because you're basically going to discredit all of psychology. You're going to say you don't believe in psychology.
No, because I'm not saying psychology is not real. I do not think that like okay, explain to me how me not believing in mindset is incompatible with psychology.
Because when you are talking about psychology, psychology is the we're not going to call it fake, but the non-empirical data of things. They include
Qualitative.
The qualitative empirical data that psychology uses is not empirical. It's not physical, actual data all the time.
Well, it's qualitative, so it's based on someone's perception, and it's not something that's objectively measured.
The mindset. The definition of mindset is the established set of attitudes held by somebody. So if you have a perspective, your particular attitude towards something, that is your mindset. So when you use the word perspective, you can substitute the word perspective for mindset. So continue saying what you would say, but instead of using the word perspective, use mindset, and it still works. That's your mindset. So mindset being a fake thing would make perspective being a fake thing. All right, so yeah, as I was saying, the established set of attitudes held by someone. That is the definition of mindset. So like I said, when we are talking about perspective, how can you say perspective anything and you can replace the word perspective with mindset? So when you say mindset is fake, you're saying someone's perspective is fake. When you're saying, oh, mindset, that is someone's perspective on things. That's their mindset. What you think about something is the set in which your mind is. This even says in decision theory and general systems theory, a mindset is a set of assumptions, methods, or notations held by one or more people or groups of people. Meaning that as Black people, our mindset or what we think and our perspective on money or based on our experiences, the process and how we make a decision is different. So how what do you mean you mindset is witchcraft?
I mean, in the sense in which like it's used in place of actual solutions. So like, for example, like the problem with like people who don't make enough money is that they don't make enough money. But like, if you want to solve the problem like with something other than the obvious solution, then you then have to come up with, some other nonsense, such as like, oh, well, no, it's actually not the fact that they don't make enough to pay their bills, it's their mindset.
Well, I mean, yeah, mindset's a huge thing and affects like your mindset affects literally everything. Your mindset or your perspective literally affects everything. Because if you take two different people and put them in a situation and tell them to make a decision, they're going to probably make different decisions based on their experiences. Which
Right. And
is
their experiences is not the same thing as their mindset. Like, because your mindset is just the way you're choosing to see your, like, the way you choose to view your personal experiences, and like, well, not even view your personal experiences, the way you choose to frame your personal experiences into a narrative about how you view the world and how you live your life. So like, you can like adjust that in a way that makes you happier. You can adjust that in a way that makes you more productive. You can adjust that in like a lot of ways. And like, I agree that like the way you choose to see things can make a really big difference in what happens. But I just refuse to acknowledge that as being like the supreme determiner of everything that happens to you, in the way that people who want to excuse poverty and like blame people for their situation do. People who want to blame people for being poor think that mindset is everything. And so like, I agree that it is something, but I just like push back strongly against the notion that it's at all like really powerful or formative.
because it is your experiences and your perspective are shaping that. So your
Well,
mind,
experiences are different than mindset, because experiences aren't determined by you. Like, what experience you had in education, what experience you had growing up, where you've been, who you've talked to, who you've met, all those things can affect how you make decisions, but those things are not mindset. That's just like privilege or
those are
lack of it.
those are the actions out of that shape mindset. So when you have a particular person, we're going to take person A, right? We're just going to call this person A. Person A has been through some things. They have had hardships in their life. They understand that things don't come easily. And so when they work and they receive $1, they can make that dollar stretch way further because they understand the value and the concept of money at a young age. They realize that this dollar, I don't know when I'm going to get another dollar again. So I have to make this particular dollar last as long as I can. How am I going to make this dollar last as long as I can? Those things go and play a part in your decision making process. So if your experiences play a part in your decision making process, your experiences shape your mindset, your perspective, if you will. You have to put yourself in a position to change your mindset, which changes your experiences, which also changes your outcome. Because here's the thing, the experience is something that you can't change. You can't change the fact that something happened to you, right? What you can change, however, is how you react to it should something like that happen again. So, for example, if you lost your apartment, how you deal with how you lost your apartment will shape how you go about and do other things in life.
Well, the fact that you have an eviction on your credit history will shape it way more.
No. Because here's the thing, mindset says if you have an eviction, I now need to go make a certain amount of money to be able to afford to pay for something in cash.
Right, which is like a situation that is dictated by the fact that you have an eviction on your notice and not by your mindset. So like, you like the fact that you have an eviction on your credit is the driver of the behavior that's saying that you need to have the cash up front. It has nothing to do with your mindset. It has to do with the fact that you now can't get an apartment.
No, it doesn't necessarily have, while it has to do with how you get an apartment, it affects you in your mindset completely different. What are you going to do for an apartment now? Are you going to let that make you homeless though? That is mindset. Are
It's
you going
not
to
about let. You have an eviction on your credit. So like, being
okay,
homeless is a very, very likely possibility no matter what you do. You just have to try to prevent it.
mindset. So you're saying an eviction on your record means that you're going to be homeless.
No, it means that it's incredibly likely, unless you either have some place to go or like some kind of money saved or like some kind of other thing that's going to happen. Like most people that get evicted, like the stuff goes on the side of the road and they're homeless at that moment.
It takes a long time for things to just go on the side of the road. You have
No, it doesn't. When you get evicted and the police show up and say you got to go, your stuff goes on the side of the road.
yeah, that's
what
not how the
eviction is.
that's not how the eviction process goes.
That's what getting evicted is. It's the police showing up and telling you to get out.
No, there's a full
It doesn't matter what like nonsense they do before that. That's the like violent action that is eviction.
If you are going through the eviction process, there is
it's not a process.
Yes, it is.
Like getting evicted is just you getting it. Like I understand that there's this ridiculous formal process, but like you go sit in front of a judge and they're like, "Why can't you pay? I lost my job. I can't afford it. I'm trying." Oh, well, too bad. You're evicted. That's not a process.
Okay. Yeah, it is, bro. Do you know how long it takes for someone to be evicted?
It doesn't matter. That's not a due fair process.
Yes,
like,
it is, bro.
It's like meant to come to an agreement in which like people can stay in their homes. That's just a way for like investors to be able to turn over tenants, to be able to make sure they always make their money. Because right now our system is geared towards that and not geared towards people having housing. That's why we have homeless people. That's why we have hella evictions all the time.
Bro, it costs money and time to evict a tenant.
Oh. Poor you, the stuff that you spent to kick somebody out of their home.
Bro, because you're not paying. Like, here's the thing. If you are evicted in the sense that police come to your house to kick you out, that is at least a 6-week period.
Right. And if you owe 2 months of rent and you also would owe the month for the time that you're still there, it doesn't make a difference how long it takes.
Bro, think about that. Think about that. Why are you so you're basically telling me.
Bro, we're literally in the middle of a pandemic right now. And right now, millions of people are about to get evicted from their apartments because they could not work during a pandemic. That's why they're behind on their rent.
There are people behind on their rent way before Corona.
Right, but so what? You ask, how are you 2 months behind on your rent? Because of the coronavirus pandemic. Millions of people are about to get evicted from their apartments this upcoming week because they cannot pay because their job got ended. And the judge is just like, well, that's unfortunate, but that's everyone's problem, so I'm going to give the eviction.
It's unfortunate, but it is everyone's problem. Is the landlord supposed to just not have rent? Because guess what? Either way, that means you get evicted. Because if you don't pay rent, the landlord can't pay the mortgage. If the landlord can't pay the mortgage, the bank come and take the house. And guess what? The bank then kicks you out. So guess what? Either way, someone's going to be a bad person in that situation. So I might as well keep what I have and get someone else in here who can pay the rent. Because either way, you leaving. It don't make no sense for you to get kicked out and then for me to not have a house.
I mean, people with a mortgage are much more likely to be able to negotiate and have a chance to keep the house. Very few people, people who have a mortgage are in way less precarious circumstances than people who are renting.
Completely false. People that have a mortgage have a higher burden.
Yeah, but that doesn't matter because it's less precarious because the bank has a financial incentive to keep you in the house versus a landlord does not necessarily have a financial incentive to keep a tenant in the house.
They have the same incentive because if a landlord can't keep someone in the house, the bank treats the landlord like they were the tenant. When you go and get a mortgage, you are doing the exact same thing as getting rent. You are going to go pay a monthly fee to
right, except that you own a building and you're getting equity.
And you have to borrow. Equity is nothing. Equity means nothing. Because guess what? You then have to borrow and pay that back.
If you pay rent, it's gone. If you have equity, that's something. And a whole lot of people pay their house off, have $100,000 in equity that they roll over into a bigger house, continue their mortgage, and that's how you build wealth in America. So you cannot say that equity is nothing.
Equity is still nothing, bro.
But that's how people build wealth in America. So you can't say that equity is nothing.
Because that number is imaginary, bro. When you're saying people are building wealth, they're really not. They're really not. They're increasing a net worth that is an imaginary number. And in order to achieve that imaginary number, you still would have to pay that number back. So if you have $50,000 in equity into a house, right? And then you go and want to take out that $50,000 in equity, guess what? You have to take a loan, refinance your house, and then continue to go pay that money back. So
Right.
now by taking out equity, that puts you in debt.
But that's not how people build wealth. You don't build wealth by pulling your equity out of your house. You build wealth by rolling that equity over into a bigger property, and then when you pay that off, what you own is now bigger than the thing you would have originally owned. That's what I mean by building wealth. You don't pull equity out of a house. That's borrowing money and refinancing your house. That's a terrible decision.
So you're expecting people who already don't have money to want something that costs money to give them imaginary money. You want people that rent that can take the extra money that they would save from owning a house.
You don't save money renting.
Yeah, you do, because guess what? You don't have the responsibilities of owning that house.
Yeah, but rent is so expensive in the places that people actually want to live.
It's the same cost as a mortgage.
Right.
And
so then therefore you're not saving money.
bro, so you are saving money because you're not only paying mortgage, you then have to pay taxes, you then have to pay the fix-ups, you then have to do all of this extra stuff that you don't have to do as someone who rents.
What's going on, Ramblers? I don't mean to interrupt today's podcast, but we have a quick mid-roll from our sponsors.
If someone who rents,
But you can't think of renting as a concept in which you then would have extra money, because that's not how it works. Because rents are so high that rents are only supposed to be like 25% of income.
bro,
but that's
if you
not
are
the case
renting,
for most
if
people.
you can't afford a rent, you can't afford a mortgage because they're going to be the same price. If you look
No, I get it, but that's what I'm saying. People can't afford a mortgage, so they're stuck renting, and renting has gotten so expensive that it is not the case that renting is cheap.
renting is not cheap, no. But
So
it's
then
cheaper
therefore
than
you're
owning.
not
It's cheaper
saving
than
money.
owning. It's cheaper than
But if it's
owning
not
a
an
place.
option, then it makes no difference, and that does not create any disposable income on which you could be saving. And that's the implication you're trying to make that I'm
because
fighting
it does.
against.
Because when
But
you
it
have,
doesn't, because
if you pay
people don't have
$1,200,
disposable income.
because when you have rent, this is what you pay for rent. You pay $1,200 a month in rent, and then you pay, let's just call it $300 a month in utilities, for a total of $1,500 a month. Over the course of a year, you're now paying $18,000 for where you live. When you own the house, you pay the $1,200 in mortgage, plus the the $300 for utilities, plus
People that rent pay their own utilities.
We put that up there. We already put that up there. The total was $1,500 for someone that rents. Rent plus utilities. In this particular case, you have rent plus utilities, the same $1,500. However, we were also going to, over the course of the years, have fix-ups. So the average cost of a fix-up, the average cost of owning the house was like $13,000 a year. So on top of that, you also have debt now. So that affects
$13,000 a year in what?
And just call an average cost to own a house. The average American outside of mortgage, home ownership actually cost the average American household $13,000.
On what?
Maintenance, repairs. Hold on, I'll break it down. It gives the breakdown. Maintenance and repairs, home improvements, property taxes, homeowners insurance.
Property taxes are probably a good chunk of that. You have to imagine. And if you're paying your rent, the property taxes are already included in the rent cost because they are paying it based off of what you're giving them.
How much rent? Rent, we already agreed, would be, if whatever the rent is basically how much the mortgage costs in that area.
Not necessarily. Sometimes people jack up the rents like higher than what they are.
Obviously,
you're not making money if the mortgage is less than the rent.
On average, the cost to rent is the cost of a mortgage. If you look at the cost of owning, if you look at the cost of a mortgage and the cost of rent, varying on the area, they're roughly going to be about the same amount. So
right, but just logically speaking, if the person who owns the house has a mortgage for $2,000, logically they're not charging $2,000 for rent, because how would that work?
because it's a multifamily.
That's what I'm saying. So like they're bringing in more than
$6,000.
$2,000. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So if their mortgage is only 2,000 and they're bringing in 6,000, that's the only way that could work. They can't bring in, like, if the mortgage for a one family unit is 2,000, the rent has to be higher than 2,000, or else the business can't function.
Correct. Which means they usually will get either the mortgage in on a lower thing or charge a higher rent. But most of the times, people aren't going to rent out or buy a single family home for the purpose of renting it out.
Right, but in a multifamily unit, if the rent, if four families were to buy a 4-unit building and they were to all split the mortgage, it would be way cheaper to do that than for them to all rent it out, because the person who gets the mortgage on the house is going to charge them way more for rent combined than they pay for the mortgage, because that's the only way the business can run.
Right. So,
and the fact that real estate companies buy up all these properties and inflate prices and take things off the market takes away the opportunity for families to be able to do things like buy these buildings and stuff like that.
It wouldn't buy them anyway, because you said you have to get 5 families together.
If that was a thing that was possible, people would do that. But right now, corporations buy these buildings hand over fist.
People do it.
I know, but I'm saying, like, it's not something that's going to happen a lot because of the way the economy is structured and the way people not really having disposable income to be able to put together deposits and stuff like that, or down payments is what I mean.
Same thing. Anyway, you save money when you rent. That's all I was basically.
But it's not true, because we just established that if you had the mortgage, it would cost less than the rent, because the rent can't cost the same as the mortgage because they wouldn't be able to make money.
That's in a business situation. We're talking about a single family. If you're a single person, a singular person going to rent or buy a house, it is cheaper for you to rent.
But no, because if you were to buy the same house, your mortgage will be $2,000. If somebody else buys the house and you rent it and their mortgage is $2,000, they would have to charge you more than $2,000.
Okay, and so in order to get into that particular situation, to pay $2,000 a month for that mortgage, you have to put on normal 20% down if you're not doing an FHA loan. And we're gonna go on a $100,000 house. So if you have a $100,000 house, your 3-4% is going to be $3,000 or $4,000 up front.
Right, and so if you have rich parents, your rich parents give it to you, and now you own this house, and now you can charge somebody else rent and make them pay you $2,500, even though the mortgage is $2,000, and you make $500 a month.
We're talking about a single family house.
Right, like the person who actually owns the house has rich parents, and they put the money down for them. That's how most houses are bought.
And they have, and where are they going to live? So now, where's that person going to live? If they're going to rent out,
but what are you talking about? That doesn't matter. The whole point is that it's an investment property. So their parents give them the money for the down payment.
We're not talking about an investment property, because
it is. That's what all housing is.
All housing is not investment.
Because anything that you're not living in personally is an investment.
We're talking about this person living in this house personally, though. We're not talking about someone renting. We're talking about if someone buys a house.
Right, but if they were to rent it out, they would be renting it out at $2,500. They wouldn't be renting it out at $2,000, because that's the same price as the mortgage.
But we're not talking about that. We're talking about saving money as a renter versus an owner. As an owner,
so it has to be the same property for it to be an apples to apples comparison.
Yes, and we're talking about in this property, it is a single family house, because you have to live there. The people renting have to live there. So the person buying the house in the same situation has to live there. They can't be buying that as an investment, because that's apples to oranges.
No, what I'm saying is, I'm just saying that the price to rent that same house can't be $2,000, because the person who bought the house, their mortgage payment is $2,000. So they have to charge more than that to be able to rent it out profitably. So it can't be $2,000 to get the mortgage and $2,000 to rent it, is what I'm saying.
Okay. Now I see what you're saying. Okay. So then let's call it.
So it would have to be more expensive to rent, because renting is like a profit business. The rent has to be more expensive than the mortgage. It's the only way the math works.
Okay, so then let's call it more expensive than the mortgage. So let's say $500 difference. Person A is
So
paying $2,000 a month. Person B is paying $2,500 a month. So the person who's paying $2,500 a month also has to pay utilities. So let's go to $2,800 a month, right? So they pay $2,800 a month multiplied by 12. That is $33,000 for living in that $2,500 a month house. The person who pays $2,000 then also has to pay taxes. So we'll add another. The property taxes are, let's just say, of that $100,000 house, 4 what are the property taxes?
well, you have to understand that any cost you're going to put on owning the building would have to increase the rent, because there's no way that the person who owns the building is going to bring in less in rent than it costs to own and operate the building.
Not true.
Well, then how do they make money?
Not all landlords make money. Some houses aren't making money.
I know, but what I'm saying is then they weren't able to charge the rent that they wanted to where they were able to make money. What I'm saying is, as a business, the business model is such that it's not possible for them to be renting out the building for less than it costs for them to own it.
It does, because here's the thing: the landlord, in order to even get the place, had to put, let's just call it $10,000 down on a very expensive low end, inexpensive low.
Right, and most of the time that came from their parents and not from them working.
We can't say that.
I mean, that I'm pretty sure that's established fact. We can look that up. Most down payments are gifts from parents.
Still $10,000. So you're
right, but if it's a gift from your parents, it's not $10,000 you earn. That's just your privilege, and now you have a leg up over people to where you're charging them rent and you have passive income, and that's how the gap between black and white wealth got created.
So even if this person worked and did the $10,000, it still doesn't always mean, for most of the times, because of the cost we're talking about $13,000 tacked on to whatever this person does normally.
Yeah, that's on average, and it may not be that much.
You're right, because it could be more.
Right, and it could be a lot less. And most likely, $13,000 worth of repairs is not going to need to happen on a $100,000 house every single year.
No, it's not about $13,000 in repairs. It's $13,000 in costs.
I mean, $13,000 in costs on a $100,000 house. There's you wouldn't buy a house that needed $13,000 worth of stuff every year. That was $100,000. That wouldn't make any sense at all. So that would have to be on the low end of that number.
Yeah, it would. It does make sense. Bro, if we are talking about a $100,000 house and it needs $13,000 a year, and we're talking about maintenance, repairs, home improvement, property taxes, and homeowners insurance. Those are yearly things. Homeowners insurance is every year. Property taxes.
What's that, $300 a month? That's $3,600.
Property taxes are $26. Homeowners insurance is $12. Maintenance and repairs is $26. Home improvement is $66.
Why would you do $6,600 in home improvement on a $100,000 house every single year?
Because it's not every single year. It comes out on average.
That's what I'm saying. So therefore, it's going to be much less than that on a yearly basis.
Yes, but when something happens, that means it's going to be a lot larger for that to happen. So if you don't have anything in year 1, that means in year 2, say you don't have anything. In year 3, now something all of a sudden costs $15,000.
Right, and if you put money aside, then you're still coming out ahead.
But are you putting money aside? You have to live off that money.
I mean, how much necessarily.
How much are you putting aside? You have to live off of that money. So how much are you?
Who says that? That's not a necessary condition. That's just a transaction of renting a house doesn't have to be something that you rely on for income. It could just be something that you do.
It's still going to cost. It costs to be the boss. So $18,000, bro. The average homeowner doesn't have $500 saved. Let's put it like that. The average cost of a house is $13,000 a year after you purchase it. The average owner doesn't have $500 saved up. So then make that work. So when you have an $18,000 situation, a $15,000 situation that the renter is not responsible for because they rent, and the average homeowner only has $500 saved up for repairs. Not like you have $500 saved up to do anything. Now you're at a $17,500 loss that the tenant doesn't have.
Right, but that's just like an individual case that may or may not happen.
No, that's
And
an
in a lot
average.
of
That is an average. That is an average.
Yeah, but average doesn't mean that it's gonna, like, average also includes like a property that costs $10 million. Like, average includes everything. So that means if we're talking about a small dollar house, the odds are we're gonna be at the lower end of that spectrum. If you want to talk about a 17 unit building, then we're gonna talk about how much rent you're getting from that, and you should be able to save something. But if we're talking about a 1 unit, like a duplex that costs $150,000, and you own that and you're doing your thing, like, you should not be like shelling out huge amounts of stuff unless like your property is a liability, at which point it was a bad buy, which isn't necessarily your fault, but like you do have to take the consequences of a bad investment.
When you buy a property, when there's a house for sale, there are a certain number of things that need to be put in place in order for that property to run. And there's more than maintenance, repairs, home improvements, property taxes, homework. Actually, no, I think you can. Yeah, because it has maintenance and repairs, and that's if things, break and stuff. So, however, those things are feasible and cost the same, really depending, no matter what the house is. So, for example, if you need to replace a water, like if you have a water damage, right? Chances are the damage from the water isn't going to change based on how nice or expensive your house is. Water damage is water damage. Replacing a pipe is replacing a pipe.
So right, but we're talking like, unless we're talking just like a giant mansion, if it's that big and expensive, we're usually talking multifamily units, at which point the conversation isn't about how nice it is. It's about how much you're pulling in rent and the cash flow, to where you should be able to feasibly pretty easily save for like repairs.
You say feasibly or should be, and that's not the case. We already discovered and know that.
Right, and that's
most business owners only make $50,000 a year.
Right, and that's unfortunate, but like it doesn't change the fact that like if you have a 15 unit building, you're getting enough in rent to where you need to be saving for repairs. And that's not necessarily something I would say to somebody who owns something that's 150,000 that's just getting $4,000 a month from two families.
It's the same principle, bro. You need to be prepared.
But economy of scale makes things easier, so it's just not the same.
No, because here's the thing. Your mortgage is going to cost more. The amount that it's going to take to run that building is going to cost more in correlation to the amount of you're paying for that building.
Right, but like things get less expensive as they increase in volume.
No,
that's just like business.
That's if like you're buying it.
It's almost always more inexpensive to do something like with greater economy of scale than with less economy of scale. Like it's not like a 100% rule, but just like as a general principle, like selling 1,000 widgets is less efficient than selling 100,000 widgets.
It depends on how, like, everything is in correlation. So if you pay $13,000 a year on a house that cost you $100,000, that is
how close is $100,000 to the median home value in terms of the median home value? That would help us a lot, I think, in terms of like understanding. Because if $100,000, if half of all homes are $100,000 or less, then that would mean that $13,000 would be appropriate for $100,000 house. But if 50% of all homes and all like residential like buildings are $300,000 or less, then that would mean that the $100,000 home would be at a lower end than the 13,000, because it's proportional. Like the more expensive things have the higher costs. So like the $1 million house is part of this average, and that probably costs a lot more than 13,000 a year to run. Just like 13,000 is probably a lot more than it would be necessary for a $100,000 house.
Average cost of home. I hate how it does it by state.
Because the thing is, like $100,000 home is just a very different situation depending on where you are.
That is true.
Like in Austin, Texas, and some of those places, like that shit's like a McMansion.
Yeah.
But you gotta find $100,000 house in Detroit, and it's a literal crack house.
The $200,000 is the median home price in the U.S.
Okay, so feasibly, it seems like we could probably about cut those costs at least by a third.
No.
I feel like that's pretty generous.
The average cost of a home and the average cost to own a home would be in correlation. So if the average cost of a home is $200,000, then the average cost to own and keep a home is $13,000. So if the average cost of a home has to do with the high end and the low end, and then there's the in between, the same would apply for the amount to cost, the high end and the low end. So on average, if it costs $200,000 to own a house, that means on average it costs $13,000 to own that house.
So it would, like, by that math, then it would cost half as much to own it if it cost half as much to buy it. But I said a third because I thought that was even more generous to you. I said like taking a third off, because that's even more generous than cutting it in half.
If you want to do even 13,000 divided by 2, it costs $6,500 a year on top of mortgage and everything else.
Right, and that's about $500 to where that's going to come out cheaper than rent.
Not necessarily. No.
That's about $500 a month.
Right, $500 a month on top of mortgage.
Right, which is less than the rent already by about $500.
Not counting your deposit that it took to get into this deal.
Well, you also had to give a deposit to get into the home, which was like 2 months rent. So like it's not exactly the same, but like that plus the fact that most people get their deposit from their parents. So like, I just kind of don't care about it.
In 2019, 60% of home buyers came up with their own down payment.
Their own, what does that mean?
From their savings.
What does that mean explicitly? Because that's the kind of games these people play. Like, well, yeah, my parents put $2,000 a year into my savings account while I was in college, but that's my savings. So then I took it from my savings and put a down payment on the house. That's not your savings.
In 2019, 60% of home buyers came up with their down payment primarily from their own savings.
Also, the word primarily is key. And not to mention that leaves 40% of the people that can't even say that. Like really owning versus renting is just flat out a measure of privilege. Like if you have the parental support to where you've been able to like save money during college and then like get a little bit of boost or something from some family members, people like that end up buying homes. Like, and people who like work during college and are like just kind of barely trying to make it, and they get a decent job, and like a decent apartment is like the best that they can really do. Like maybe their credit's not even great because of student loan payments or whatever they got going on. Like having parents who can give you $3,000-$5,000 on a down payment for a house is the difference in wealth between like black and
Bro,
white
$3,000 to
communities. And a lot
$5,000
of
is
the time,
what the people in the hood get for a tax refund. If that's the case, take your
no,
$5,000.
it's not, bro. I mean,
What,
sometimes, but like it's not like they don't
bro?
have like specifically allocated things that that's supposed to go to.
Like what? And if you're talking about buying a house and that's so big, why are you not using that money to buy a house?
Well, a lot of people can't get approved for mortgages. And
That's
when they
it.
were getting approved for mortgages, they were getting approved for subprime mortgages that destroyed their credit. They got like evicted from their house, and it like messed up their entire financial future because of like subprime lending.
That's where we get to the housing bubble, but that's a completely different story. That messed up basically everybody. All I'm saying, it says in 2019, 60% of home buyers came up with their own down payment. So 60% of people saved up the money to put down for their down payment.
Primarily.
Yes.
Saving up 7,000 and your parents giving you 3 to where you put 10 down, like that's pretty considerable, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that's not privilege.
Bro, people spend $3,000 to bail Lil Roro out of jail.
Well, why would you not want your family member out of jail?
Because they did something. Like, that's the whole point of what I'm trying to say. Like, people are spending money on things when they could be spending it on other things. Why do you have the latest Jordans? Why do you have the newest car? And it's not doing anything.
Well, why don't you go to the suburbs and count their pockets? And like, why do you have a Peloton stroller? Why do y'all have this big old elliptical machine that you don't use?
Well,
Why
can
do
you
you
afford?
guys
Can
have
can they
3
afford it?
cars?
Can they afford it?
Well,
Are
a lot
they
of people in
complaining?
the
Are they complaining
suburbs are
about their
living
money?
well, a lot of them are living paycheck to paycheck too. And when they stopped like working, they were also feeling the pain and clamoring for help and support.
I'm not feeling bad for those people either.
What I'm
Because guess what?
saying
If
is,
you, my thing is this: I don't care what race you are, what color you are, where your particular standing is in the social bracket. If you have something and you are anywhere, let's just call it 6 months out from being homeless, not even homeless, from if you miss a paycheck, you can't make rent or make bills, you shouldn't be owning what you already own and have. Like you said, why do you have a Peloton? I will say that same thing. If you are complaining about money and your financial situation, why do you have 3 cars? Why do you have a Peloton? Why is your house so big? Sell your, like, bro, you need to listen to Gary Vee. Gary Vee is like, it really opens up. It really opens it up. It's not about how much money you have. And he's not saying don't buy a $7 coffee, but can you, I'm saying don't buy it if you can't afford it.
right, but that's the kind of thing that crops up like when you live in a society in which most of the people don't make enough money to be able to afford their lifestyle, and that's why we have $1 trillion
you heard that people cannot afford their lifestyle, so that's
right,
your
because
fault.
wages haven't gone up for 40 years.
So change your lifestyle.
People,
you need to change your
wages
lifestyle.
haven't gone up for 40 years, and everything else has continued to get more expensive, including housing, healthcare, education, transportation, entertainment, food, like vacations, like every single thing that makes life worth living has gotten more and more expensive, and wages have not gone up. So you cannot say that people's mindset and their inability to budget is the cause for the financial strain that like the majority of the country is feeling, when I just explained to you the systemic factors that have created the situation that we're seeing.
People love to blame other people. People are always looking for why why they aren't able to do something. Oh, well, it should be the government should be paying for this, and things haven't gone up. Okay, so you like use your brain. Things like, okay, if minimum wage has not increased over a certain amount of time, that would tell you shouldn't be working minimum wage, especially
But how would that tell you shouldn't be working minimum wage if the minimum wage was instituted as a way to make sure everybody can afford a reasonable standard of living, how is it your fault if people have specifically and intentionally undermined that safety net in our society so that they can make more money? How can that possibly be your fault?
Because why are you going to be making minimum wage?
Because minimum wage exists because some people have to perform services.
Why was minimum wage created?
As a minimum wage to make sure that everybody can afford a reasonable standard of living. That's the only logical reason for it to exist.
No, without even reading anything, it could logically exist because people were underpaying.
Right. So therefore they had to have a law that says you can't pay below this because people can't afford to live. Just like they used to have kids in factories and cleaning chimneys, and then they made a law that said you can't do that anymore. People used to be paying people $0.25 an hour and putting them in poorhouses and slums and stuff. So they had to make a law that said, no, you have to pay people at least this much. And then specifically, we've had political actors undermine that right that we're supposed to have in our society, to where now that minimum wage that is supposed to guarantee you a standard of living cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment in any city in the country, let alone transportation and all the other necessities of life.
Okay. Okay, that is correct. The minimum wage was designated to stabilize the post-depression economy and protect the workers in the labor force. Minimum wage was designed to create a minimum standard of living to protect the health and well-being of employees. Others have argued that the primary purpose was to aid the lowest paid of the nation's working population, those who lack sufficient bargaining power. We're gonna have to do a part 2 on this. Hold on.
Hey Ramblers, before you go, make sure you're following us on social media at Assistance HQ across the board for all content and exclusives. And for an even more personal touch, subscribe to our weekly newsletter with the link in the description.